At all at the harshness of the race for Supreme Court Chief Justice?
Not entirely, insofar as that entire race has been quite fascinating because it's this internecine war within the Republican Party. The remarkable thing will be, when it's all said and done, how some of those people are going to be able to work together on the court. But it is remarkable for a court race to be quite as dramatic and as nasty as this one has been.
Even now, I can imagine the temperature is rather low in the conference room when they get together to consider cases after some of the words that were expressed during the campaign.
Oh, absolutely. The kind of bitter, partisan debate, to me, it is worse than when you had the Democrats competing against the Republicans here. I mean, you're looking at a fight within the Democratic Party, and I cannot...
and I'm just going by the polls, by the fact that Mr. Moore did not do better than, at least in terms leading up to the election, than he did.
I'm not especially surprised, because the incumbent governor, Governor Riley, has a lot going for him and very little going against him, given the state's economy, the unemployment figures. And Chief Justice Moore hasn't really offered much, aside from, references to the religious issues and sort of his initial, I can't remember the campaign slogan, was basically sort of, let's go back to some better time. And I'm really not entirely sure what that better time was supposed to have been. I'm not sure what Roy Moore thought he would offer as governor unless the economy had continued to go, had the economy gone poorly, which it wasn't going to do. The only other issue was to run against the governor in regards to the tax issue early on in his administration, but that's a long time in politics, and further, the governor was able to get the tax cut through the legislature for lower middle income families, so that blunted that particular attack.
I was surprised. I just expected him to make that more of a part of his central part of his campaign. That this is the governor who wanted to raise your taxes.
For whatever reason, it hasn't resonated. But you're right. He didn't seem to attack it. That was the only opening that he had, was the tax question, but it didn't really play at home. Also, one interesting factor is the differential in money raised. The governor's been able to raise substantially more money than Chief Justice Moore, which is indicative of sort of, if you want to play the sort of investor analysis, he was not being invested in well by members of his party.
But there's something else you can look at, too. Once you get past Judge Moore's defiance of the federal court system, ideologically, there's very little difference between the governor and Judge Moore. In terms of religious and family values, they are both about the same. In terms of fiscal responsibility, you don't have any difference between the governor and Judge Moore on that. And so I think in the end, many of the folks in the evangelical community looked at the governor, his fiscal responsibility, conservatism, his family values and religious standing. They saw him as a friendly person to their side. And so ask yourself, which would you rather have? A governor who can appeal to a cross-section of your voters, or would you want somebody who's likely to be confrontational and bring some unwanted publicity to the state? And I think in that end, Governor Riley wins hands down.
Absolutely. And further, I mean, with Governor Riley, you kind of know what you're getting.
Absolutely.
While you have a rough idea of what you might get with Governor Moore, you don't really know what he'd be like in office. Governor Riley, aside from the tax issue early on, really hasn't stumbled much in office. And someone made the point the other day that he compares well now with Governor Siegelman's trial. There haven't been there's no allegations of problems in the Riley administration. So by contrast, he looks quite good with Governor Siegelman having to sit in his trial. All of these things, I think, work heavily in the governor's favor.
Oh, and speaking of Mr. Siegelman, the Democrats, too. There was also a Democratic primary today.
Yes.
We're talking only...
Baxter will do quite well today.
Well, but the thing about it, the fact that this race has remained up in the air, and we don't know the outcome yet. I think it's a very close race, but the fact that it has remained so close this late in the game points to a couple of things. Either the former governor is much stronger than many of us thought, or Miss Baxley is not as strong as many of us thought. You would think that with him having all kind of legal problems, having to sit in court, this race would have been over a long time ago.
Well, a la President Clinton, to bring up another race that comes to mind, where troubles on every corner, and yet,
But Clinton did not have the kind of trouble that Siegelman. Here you have real legal issues. There were many folks in the end who thought that a lot of the issues nagging Clinton were moral issues, that you didn't find any real wrongdoing there, and in the end he was exonerated and left office with the highest performance rating of any president. Not so with this governor. There are a lot of people who believe that there are legitimate charges of corruption against Siegelman.
Now, there's still votes being cast for another 10 minutes or so statewide, but do you think there's any possibility of a runoff in the Democratic gubernatorial primary?
Too close to know.
Yeah, it could happen. And again, Governor Siegelman is a good campaigner. He has a base from before. And Lieutenant Governor Baxley, I think, she's a classic, what I like to tabula rasa candidate. Anyone could project on her what she wanted. Those kinds of candidates, because she never has really come out and really established a substantial platform upon which to run. Her website is full of platitudes. Early on, those kinds of candidates look good because everyone can say, well, she must believe what I believe. But usually as campaigns go on, those kinds of candidates tend to wane, and I think that's what Dr. Finley is capturing by pointing out the closest the race. You know, certainly hardcore Siegelman supporters probably hope and believe that he's innocent and therefore can bring themselves to vote for him even given the circumstances. And Lieutenant Governor Baxley hasn't provided, I don't think, a sufficient second choice.